Welcome to Live From Your Heart. I'm your host, Les Paul Klein. For 3 decades of my life, I've lived trying to get others' approval, not the truth. I lived to be accepted, but I wasn't real authentic. And what did it cost me? Pieces of myself over and over. I didn't realize I was even losing those pieces. This podcast, it's for anyone who knows deep down that they've been living someone else's version of their life. And they're ready, you're ready to come home to your own heart and be real and be authentic. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. It's possible to reclaim your own heart. So every week we're going to talk about reclaiming that identity and healing old patterns and finding courage again and finally living from the truest and most grounded place inside of you, your heart. This isn't therapy. It's not self-help. It's just a real huge invitation for you to come and learn how to live a real life from your own heart. So let's jump in. Welcome back. My name is Les Paul Klein, and you have stepped into my podcast called Live From Your Heart. This is the 7th installment of the very first season I've ever shared my story in a podcast format. And I just want to step lightly this morning on this particular subject, the masks that we wear, and why do we hide behind it? I was born in a little town in Texas up in the Panhandle. Probably doesn't matter if I tell you we're in a little town called Canadian, Texas. And my dad was the local fundamental independent Baptist preacher. And we lived in a house that was 6 feet from the church building when I was born. Later in life, we moved to a house on the very next piece of property. My parents had already had 2 older children. If you've followed my podcast, if you remember that phrase, I've remembered it because it has an indelible memory in my brain. They said, we had the first 2 and we failed, so we've had 2 more. Here's our preacher boys. My younger brother and I were fine. They're preacher boys. But I was born on July 4th, 1959 in Hilltop County Hospital. And unbeknownst to me, and this is the story that I get from my sister, the dad had asked my older brother and sister for suggestions for my first name because my middle name's going to be Bob. That was set. That's what my dad did. They suggested Wesley. Wesley. Okay. But the first recollection of what I was given and how it impacted my life is when I went to school in the 1st grade and the teacher uses your full name. And my first name wasn't Wesley. It was Leslie. Oh my God. I can't tell you the pain and the anguish that I got from my classmates because that's a girl's name. And in those days in the '60s, that was a girl's name. It's kind of like a boy named Sue. And that's about that time that song came out. You know, I have endured through childhood and my teen years an enormous amount of pain because my first name was Leslie. It became a mask. And if there was a mask that got settled into my world on who I really was, that's the moment that I can put um, content to it for me now, today at 66 years old. Um, so here I am. I've got Leslie, this preacher who was a cowboy. And uh, gosh, there's so much. Suffice it to say that I wore that mask for a lot of years. I never used my first name. Never. Right. And it was always a point of shame. There was a point in my life where business took a classic shift. I left the large corporate company and launched my own business. And in doing so, I had the help of a marketing friend who suggested I name my company Les Klein. Use that first name because now in today's culture, it's very accepted. And so I embraced it for the first time in my life. And as you can see, if you've impacted me, plugged into me in any way, shape, or form, that's has really ended. That was my mask. I got into a fist fight a couple of times over in high school over my name being Leslie. I got punched in grade school because my name is Leslie. You're just a girl. You're obsessive. Oh my gosh. So the mask that I wore became this persona of I'm this tough guy. And there was this turmoil internally. Um, and people saw me for what I was. I wasn't hiding from them. I was really hiding from myself. I really was. And I had to prove to myself, right, wrong, or indifferent, that I wasn't a sissy, that I wasn't weak, that I was strong. So I did things that in my own mind was proving that I'm not a sissy. That was the word that was used. And well, the ultimate was when they pinned a badge on my chest and I took an oath. And my my dad said this. He said, "You think you're tough? You have that gun in your badge, parading around here in that uniform." Well, I'll never forget that. Oof. Well, truthfully, I was wearing a mask then. I was hiding from who I really was because I still had not accepted the fact of who I really was. To tell you, it took an entire lifetime to get to this place. But we learn as children to protect ourselves. And truthfully, being called a sissy because I have a girl's name will literally force you inside to protect yourself. I'm not a sissy. Okay, I'm not go. It was strong. Um, it it was solid, and it allowed a level of peace. I was performing. Wasn't who I am, but I was performing. Yeah. You ever done that? Hide behind that mask? Yeah. Never once letting that mask come off. You ever been to a masquerade party and everybody wears a mask and you don't know who people are? Hey, that's the way a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people, the majority of people have lived their entire life. This is who the public sees. And over here, those who we're intimate with, they know who we are. They know the bad of us. They know our wrongness. It's really hard to let the mask come off. So here's some things that I want you to think about. And the reason we keep these masks way into adulthood, it's safe. We've created safety. I created a safe zone around me. Okay? Um, I literally was predictable, you know, steady as she goes, a rock. Um, I was accepted. I was in a world that I was accepted. So it was safe to become a preacher because in the culture that my parents had brought me up in and the things they chose for me, that was safe. It was predictable. Yeah. Not that I liked it, but it was predictable. I was accepted. And by doing those things that they wanted me to do, I avoided rejection and I avoided rejection from them. And I had my mask up the whole time as I was a kid and into adulthood and even into my marriage. But there was that day standing in that auditorium. You heard me say this more than once if you've been listening to my podcast. There was that day that happened when I realized I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend anymore. This mask, and I didn't know what that meant then, but today I can put words to it. The mask began to come off. Okay. Here's the emotional cost of living in that format. Yeah, I was never fully seen for who I was. Leslie Paul. Yeah. And truthfully, I was exhausted pretending to be something that my parents wanted me to be. And it was unknown. People really didn't know who I was. I was this Baptist preacher. I'll never forget this. We were on the very cutting edge of churches and church growth where the Baptist name began to be removed. And everything starts on the West Coast and comes across the country. So I'll never forget this. I had a good friend I had gone to college with. He was in Carlsbad, New Mexico, or Carlsbad, California, excuse me. And he had started this new church. Um, and I started the one that I pastored in Las Vegas. He didn't begin with the Baptist name, and I was impressed. And I plugged myself into him. As it turns out, he was plugged into John Maxwell. And later on, he actually was on the staff um, with John Maxwell's church down in San Diego. And this was long before John Maxwell became who John Maxwell is today. So I had full access to John Maxwell in those days. It was really cool. I didn't know what I had. But I remember Larry in the old room of doing everything non-traditional. Yeah. There's no Baptist name. There's no Sunday night church. There's no visitation. There's no Awanas. There's no Wednesday night prayer service. All the things that Baptists do. If you're Baptist, you know what I'm talking about. Ritual, okay? In a lot of other churches, it's framed differently, but it's still the same kind of stuff. Ritualism. I'll never forget this. I led our body to take the Baptist name off of the church. Oh my. It was like we were lowering the mast. And I'll tell you, it hit some people so hard, they left. Some people embraced it widely. They were ready. If I had it to do over again, I would never do it there. I would have left that church just like it was, passed it on to somebody who fit the mold that I built, and gone on and started something very non-traditional. But you live and learn. But the bigger story is that I really wasn't called to be a pastor of a church. I mean, that's the real key that I got out of all of it. I mean, I couldn't help people and minister to them, but it meant that I didn't have the pastor's heart like a lot of guys did. Um, that emotional cost in letting down the walls in that body was huge. And when you and I personally began to take off the mask, the emotional cost of not being fully seen, the exhaustion of pretending, feeling unknown, it's all going to come home. And it came home to me. Over the years after that scene with my father in the auditorium, I'll never forget it. And I go forward, and that story I told in the last episode about being fully seen, I was fully and completely seen for just who I was by someone who had already walked this path. And she was available to open her arms and just allow me to lower the mask and remove it. And I could be me. Yeah. And then put that mask on. And it did cost to take the mask off. Yeah. It came in small doses, but then it got larger and it larger. And here's something that I learned. As I lowered the mask, I had to seek out people that were safe. I told that story about moving into where I live now in Greenville, South Carolina. And this lady actually um, handed me her job, and with the blessing of the company. And her only caveat was, you have to come to church with my husband and I. And I said, as long as it's not a Baptist church. Well, it was. Um, but what that was really saying was, I have to now go places where people are safe. And so I can tell you that I navigated into that. And I would push back on everyone and everything that was not safe. I would remove myself. And quickly I learned that who was safe, where it was safe to speak freely and be myself. And I learned that this culture that I had stepped into, and it was a group of people who had all been divorced, who all had grown up in faith. Many of them had come from um, same background that I had come from, gone to a Christian college or university, been through a divorce. So when you go through the divorce, all the pretend comes down if you get really honest. And most people are forced to. And so it was a safe place. And I began to feel the safeness when the mask stayed off. And it's been off ever since. Um, it gave me courage. I know that many of you are going, walking through the mask that you've been wearing as I've been talking. And you're thinking about the things that you have done to hide who you really are. I would encourage you. Let me just encourage you. Find a safe place, safe people, so you can be who you are and allow the mask to come down because you're never going to live from your own heart unless you're honest with yourself and allow that mask, that pretend persona to come down. What does it cost? Well, it cost a whole lot. My vote. Yeah. I lost every pastor friend I had. Everyone, they they weren't available for my phone calls, and I never received a call from any of them. I mean, I lost all of my pretend friends. All those people that I pastored, gone. I had to seek a whole new world, and by moving halfway across the country and then West Coast to East Coast, um, I learned that I should never tether myself to people who would judge me. Now I'm a divorced pastor. Talk about there's no persona anymore, but it brought a lot of judgment. And, to be honest, it still does. But that's okay. I'm not trying to pretend to be something I'm not these days. If you're living there, let me just encourage you. Remove yourself from those who are unsafe. Find a space you are safe. I went to this small recovery group one time, just seeking uh, safeness. And I'll never forget that the group dynamics were protected by the group leader. And there was no cross talk or sharing. It was tell your story. There's no judgment. And you accepted right where you were. That's rare. And it takes time to draw a bond in that world. But if you're dealing with this, you need a place that's safe. And let me say this in the kindest way possible. That's probably not a group at your church of people that you go to church with. You probably need to step outside that world and seek out people who um, are less judgmental or don't know anything about you. Because you're going to take the mask off. Um, you're going to have to peel it one layer at a time. It may take some time. But I can tell you that you need a safe place with safe people to do that. So let me encourage you. Do it. Do it. In my effort to help people, here's what I coach my students as they enter my coaching. And I have a one-to-one coaching to help you learn how to live from your heart. I have steps that you would walk through to begin to remove your mask. Look, it's not a one-time event either. It takes time. So if this is resonating and you want more, there's a link in the show notes that will connect you to me, and we can have a conversation about where you are and what your needs are. And I can hear your heart. And I could help if you're open to that. So click the link in the show notes if you want to connect to me and have a conversation. I hope something I said today resonated with you, but the sooner you take the mask off, the sooner you can live from your own heart. God bless. See you on the next episode. If today's episode stirred something in you, that's your heart speaking. If you're ready to go deeper into this work, let me invite you to come and join me in my Live From Your Heart coaching experience. It's a 6-month journey. I can take you back to the truth, help you learn your real identity, and uncover that emotional freedom that's yours to have. If you'd like to know more about my coaching experience, Live From Your Heart, you'll find the link down in the show notes. Until next time, folks, live from your heart. It's the only life that's truly yours.